quorum, we'll get started. We're expecting one more council member,
I guess I'm
so please pardon the delay.
maybe they'll put something in front of
Am I still in your chair? No, you're good there?
I'm here.
How you been?
How are you?
Yeah.
Who normally sits here?
I don't think anybody.
If I take a shower, somebody sits next to me, and if I don't take a shower, nobody sits
No one
next to
does.
me. So I need to put the order in.
Huh?
I need to put the order in. All that good stuff.
What's that? Oh, yeah, you're fine. I've known you long enough.
Can you set the clock up so I could see it too? Let me just,
How did already?
just like this.
Okay.
How are you?
Chat about something, but okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. We've been joined by the Honorable Councilmember Paul Krikorian, and I anticipate Councilman Huizar. Do we know yet if he's going to be here? He should be? Okay, so we'll anticipate. We have a few items perhaps we can address at this time. Those will be continued and so forth. One we'll call special. We have a presentation. And two, we will ask the planning department to give us a report today. Three, okay, we will be having our discussion on community facilities ordinance, and on that item, we did close public hearing.
Yes, Council.
Okay, great. Four, we're going to hold. I understand we might have a speaker on that item, and they might be asking for continuance, but we'll see. Five, we will continue to April 12th. Six, we'll continue 1 week. And, yeah, we'll just hold that. We'll continue that for 1 week. Seven, we'll continue to this committee on May 3rd. And hopefully the council on May 18th. And let's hear the director's report, if he has one. Are you up for it?
Sure. Michael Grand, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Director.
One major item I wanted to report to you, our planners have done a great job getting the Hollywood Community Plan out on the streets. So the draft Hollywood Community Plan, including the Environmental Impact Report draft, are both out and available for public review. We've extended the comment period by an additional 30 days, and we're excited about the participation we've had from all the stakeholders in Hollywood and throughout the city to see one of our first new community plan updates be available and to start to go through the approval process. So you should see that happening within the next few months as we go through Planning Commission and eventually through the Plum Committee and the City Council. And that's all I have to report today.
Now, just for the record, in terms of community plans, I know we are at approximately about 40% of our staff in the planning department no longer is with us, correct?
Correct.
And as such, we've curtailed the number of community plans that we had set as a goal.
Yes.
We went from 10 to 7?
Yes, we currently have 7 community plans in process
Okay.
for updates.
So the progress we're making is within that context.
Correct. Yeah, we anticipate by the end of 2012, all 7 of those plans will be before the City Council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LeGrand. Any questions for the director, council member? Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the hard work, and just reiterate my appreciation for the staff and getting here every morning and being positive and making the best of what we have, and hopefully they don't give up and stay with that fighting spirit. Thank you, sir. Okay, so let's get back to, I believe it's item number 1, Roberto. Can you read it for the record?
Yes, item 1, council members, it's a presentation by the consultant, KH Consulting Group, Wolpert. It's a status report on the development review process.
Yeah, and as he's coming up, I want to reiterate that number 3, we had the public comment. I do have 2 cards. Both Denny Snyder and Ursula Ortiz, you want to make you aware that we already had public comments, so we'll put your name in the record, but we're not going to open up public comments again. So we're going to go into the discussion. Sir, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, council members, I'm Bud Overham, General Manager of the Building and Safety Department, and you have designated our department to be the contract administrator for the latest development reform effort. We're working very closely with the Planning Department in particular and the Bureau of Engineering, but we're the department that's in charge of the paperwork and the logistics and making sure the contract is administered. And when we last reported to you, after the consultants have been retained, you indicated that you wanted regular progress reports on how things were going. We're at one phase of the process where they have completed the outreach, the public outreach, talked to a lot of people, gotten a lot of thoughts, and so they wanted to come in today and give you an update on how that initial phase of the report's going. No action is pending before you. It's simply an update on how they're doing so that you can see their progress and give us any input along the way. Okay. So with that, I will have the consultant, Gayla, who you've met before, and she'll give the presentation.
And Mr. Overman, I'm hoping as we go through this presentation, if when the opportunity arises in your presentation to speak to how the current staff levels, how does that fit into your assumptions and your assertions, if you can keep that in mind as you go through the process, we'd appreciate that.
And you have one of the leading authorities on staff reductions right with you.
Yes, thank you.
My name is Gayla Craig Hartso. I am president of KH Consulting Group. Welcome, council members. I had met with you at the onset of the project. At that time, I shared with you the study plan, and we are really at the midpoint. So today is a very timely way to give you an update and share with you not only where we are at, but what are the areas of focus in terms of developing an approach to development reform. The project itself is a 6-month project. It's divided into 2 parts. We've completed Part A, evaluation and research, which I'll go through. And then we are currently in the process of embarking the actual planning for the actions that need to be taken to make the needed improvements. When I presented the scope to you before, one of the big items that we needed to focus on was how to make this a seamless process. And we've spent a lot of time looking at the processes within each of the departments. And our effort now is to move it up to a citywide kind of a perspective. The scope of the work at the start of the project was land use entitlement, public improvement permitting, and the building permitting process itself. I wanted to also emphasize one thing at the onset, too. We do not see that you need another consultant report. So it is our intention that this be very different from the kinds of studies you've had done in the past. What we are really building is a strategic plan of how to approach development reform. What are those actions you can take in the next 6 months? What are the actions to be completed in year 1, year 2, year 3? And Councilman Reyes, in terms of the staffing, that's going to be one of the reality checks in terms of what actually can be done during the current furlough situation and what may have to be deferred to year 2, year 3. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done. Doesn't mean it's not a priority. It really will be a reality check that we'll have to look at when we get further into the action planning and looking at all the things that could be addressed. In terms of evaluation and research, we've held 5 kickoff meetings with the various city departments. We've interviewed over 70 city officials, city council members. We have gone through a lot of external stakeholder input. We held 5 industry forums with 135 participants around town. We had 4 community forums of neighborhood council, homeowners associations with 94 participants. We've been spending considerable time flow charting the current processes. We've focused on the top 20 processes of the 12 departments that are involved in the development activities. We also have done a nationwide search on best practices and have identified 146 best practices for the City of Los Angeles to consider. I was amazed when we were given the stack of documents sent electronically and we started printing them out. We have reviewed more than 100 documents. These go back to 1995, and they all focus around some aspect of improving the development process. When we just focused on the recommendations that had not been implemented as of January 1, we've developed a list of over 500 ideas and recommendations that have been put forth. These are from the City Council, from the City Controller's Office, from the department heads themselves, from BIA, AIA, CCA, and various other groups around the city, including the Development Reform Advisory Committee. We also have a link posted, and it's up on the PowerPoint, and I'm happy to say it aloud. It's www.surveymk.com/development-reform. And we have welcomed any members of the community or any city employees involved in the process to post their ideas. And so far, we have 169 people who have put additional ideas online to be shared. So that's what we would call our homework. That's our research and our background. You should be asking us, okay, now what are we going to do with all that input? And that brings us to the exciting part, which is really the implementation improvement strategy and the action plans to go with it. This flow chart is really where we started in January. We said that we're going to look at policies and procedures and see if, in fact, there's some administrative changes that could be made to streamline the process, make it more efficient, make it less maybe staff-intensive. We're also going to look at process and technology, structures, staff alignments, and we really emphasize the need to look at work culture and training. And the whole emphasis of the original RFP was let's do process improvement and technological enhancements for timely and complete response. And that was really the scope we started out with. We emphasized to expand the scope, and it's part of our work to do this, that we have to look at the culture, because unless people are receptive to trying new ways, trying a new technology, it won't happen, which is part of the failures of the efforts in the past. What's been interesting with all the input we got from the external stakeholders, and we listened very carefully to them, they felt that was not enough. And therefore, we've expanded our thinking to include this next slide. Why are we doing this? We're not just doing this so that developers can build more buildings. We're not just doing this so people can do their own livelihood. We're really doing this so that LA can be a world-class city. And we really need to make sure that it's economically sustainable and has accountable, transparent, and predictable development, both in terms of the communities wanting to know what's going to happen to their communities today and tomorrow, as well as for developers to know what is it that I am going to be able to build as I go forward. The other thing that became very clear is we could come up with process improvements and wonderful technological enhancements, but if you don't have the money to do it, what's the point? So we've also added to our scope a financial strategy to figure out the fee structure, the cashiering, how we can make logical and smart investments in technology, not just for today, but for upgrading the technology going forward. Some of your current technology is 16 years old. It should have been continually looked at as going forward. Now, we believe this larger look at the issues, which we believe need to be tackled, is a better outcome for the City of LA. If we really want to be world class, we want LA to be the best place to work, live, and visit, we need to do some major accountable development. To do that, we need timely response, we need the money to do it, we need the internal processes and technology and structure and staff to accomplish it, and we need the right work culture so they'll be committed to making those outcomes. So what have we done? We've taken those areas and we've put together implementation improvement teams. And these teams consist of city employees and managers, and each team is anywhere from 3 to 20 people. We facilitate the workshops, and we're working with them to develop the action plans of what they feel is feasible to do in year 1, year 2, and year 3. So you'll see on the slide, we have 9, we've added a 10th implementation improvement team that are working now so we can build consensus and institutional commitment to the change. So once we leave as consultants, you will have the kind of energy and understanding behind the action plans so that the city and the departments own them, and it's not just a consultant report.
In this effort, as it's being explored, improvement ideas, where does the role of the union fall when we speak to work culture and we speak to different ideas? How does that fit in? Because they're not identified in the 9.
Right. Actually, we've interviewed union members. They're welcome to join an implementation improvement team if they would like. Obviously, we have to work within union rules. Basically, all the members of the implementation improvement team are union members. So obviously, it's a very important consideration as we go forward, and we need to think that through.
I know it's a delicate subject, but it's also a real reality
Absolutely.
when it comes to the budget process
Right.
and how we look at resources. I appreciate what you just said.
And I believe in labor management partnerships and trying to figure out the solutions. And I think unless the employees who have to make it a reality are not part of the implementation improvement teams, they're going to think it's something forced on them from on top, and there will be greater resistance. We find this inclusive process much more effective in building that kind of commitment
Great.
to bring change about. Okay, so let me break down the areas of focus, and let's start at the very top in terms of our communities and our policies. Let's go on down, Sarah. We've set as sort of a lofty mission or vision that LA should be the best place to live, work, and visit. And as part of that, and you heard Michael Legrand present the plans for the community plans, when we got into it, the community wanted updated community plans, and there were 7 that were in the process to be rolled out. They also wanted to know, in the context of all 35 plans, when might my plan happen? Because there was a feeling that if we have updated plans, we'll have a better understanding of what our community will be. The industry people, many of them felt it would give them a better understanding of what it would be that would be permissible. So when we talked to planning and we talked with the steering committee, they felt it would be important to include in the strategic plan, the planning department's ideas of what they could roll out in the next 3 years. So that's been added, along with communication and public outreach, because that was also identified as a very critical area, particularly in understanding stakeholder input in terms of guidelines, how information is available on the website, how it is shared widely, development of a communication plan for development reform that would span the 3-year implementation process, and the role of the neighborhood liaison. The other area with policies and procedures is really looking at economic development and accountable development. And in this area, it was very interesting because, again, the planning department stepped forward and said, you know, if we just look at the community plans, that really won't solve our problems. We currently have zoning ordinances that were last reformed in 1946. We have many amendments. They're very complex. It's based on an old Euclidean model from the 1940s and 1950s, actually 1920s, and our city's changed. And when we looked at best practices across the nation and the 50 largest cities in the United States, we found that 22 of them had gone through zoning code reform since 1995. Of those, 21 had been successful, and they basically shifted towards a more form-based, more hybrid type approach of what the feel, the city streetscape, what the community should be, with a lot more community engagement and involvement and visioning in terms of their community. The one that failed was New York City. And we can learn lessons from why New York failed, partially because it takes a lot of political will. It's a 3 to 5 year process in a smaller city, so it's clearly going to be a 5-year process or more here. But again, in talking to the planning department, there is a strong feeling that unless we look at how to look at the zoning in a more holistic way, the policies and procedures and everything else also will continue to be cumbersome. We also are looking at some procedural changes. If a project's by right, does it have to go through the same laborious process? We're looking at different things in the area of CEQA in terms of evaluation of thresholds, training of the staff, and other kinds of updated guidelines. The heart of the project, though, you will say to me, was all about customer service and timely and complete response. So indeed, we are looking at these other areas as well. We're looking at technology and finance in terms of how to finance them. Let's go on, Sarah. Whoops, one more up. The key areas here is how can we get more full cost recovery so we can have the fees to make the changes? How can we look at other areas in that aspect? In terms of process improvements, we can go on down to. What we want to do is have efficient, transparent, accountable, consistent, and predictable customer service. Both the community wants that and the builders want that. We're looking at citywide project processing, which is looking at a more seamless approach in every process improvement. There's a term we hear in too many interviews. One department does their work, and the phrase that's used is then it's thrown over the fence to the next department. That department gets it. There's no timeline. There's no turnaround. They have lots of other priorities. They have their own staffing shortage. And when they get to it, then they take it and they throw it over the next fence. There's not even a common tracking number that if you wanted to know where that had last been thrown over the fence to easily identify where a project is. So we need to start changing the process and the thinking of people to think about how each step fits into the entire process. We need the technology so we know on the front end there's one common application when you come in, there's one tracking number, there's one database where the information's available, and we can start developing more tools then on how to make it efficient in terms of standard clearance language, roadmaps and checklists so people know what they need to do, performance metrics for turnaround, just to name a few. Another area is you've got multiple GIS platforms. It would be nice if there was a common GIS platform that all could use. So those are some of the highlights of the process and technology improvements, but if we only do those, that would be like getting a new engine in a rickety old car if we don't also address these bigger pictures in terms of zoning, procedures, and the community plans and general plan. The last area, which I know you have great interest, is the work culture and training. And that is quite a large group. And they are also looking at concepts of how to change, oh, did I skip a level? I'm sorry, on structure, staffing, and facilities. I'm sorry, Sarah. We'll go to structure. There you go. If you just do process improvements and you don't look at some of the other ways in terms of structure and staffing, it too will be incomplete. So in that area, we're looking at the governance structure and how to sustain this change process, implement the strategic plan going forward. We're looking at how to resolve when there are differences in viewpoints between departments, because right now there's no single nexus to get those kinds of issues resolved without going to a city council office or going to the mayor. And we feel that a lot of these areas that are more administerial could be handled lower. We're looking at the one-stop shop and saying, it should be like a mall where you go there and every single station is open on the same day for the same hours, has a customer-friendly attitude, might have an appointment system, might have a site manager. We are looking at various other kinds of ways in terms of staffing workload and if there any way to reallocate the workload with the various process improvements. The final area is what we call learning in people. And this is something that's been learned over the years in corporate America. If you just do process improvement, but you don't work with the people and train them in the new technology, in the new processes, in the new way of working, it's not going to give you the outcome you want. So this particular implementation improvement team is focusing on customer service values, training, various human resource systems, internal communications, and aspects like that. So to just conclude, we want to look at the culture because we need to train our workforce in order to achieve the changes we want in terms of process improvement. By doing that, we can generate the fees, ideally, that will then allow us to do timely and complete response, that will allow us to have accountable development and economic sustainable to make LA the best city in the world. Now, our next steps. We started January 1. We are now in the process of developing the action plans, and in year one, we're going to try to build in what we call low-hanging fruit. Some of those things that do not require additional staff, things that would just make the whole process a lot easier to use and to implement. But we will be outlining what can be done in year one, year two, year three. We will be developing a draft in early June. You should have something to look at, and we'll be refining it and delivering the final strategic plan to turn over to the departments in the city to implement by the end of June. So we're on schedule.
Great, thank you for that presentation. One of the, I think, variables that are of concern to the city, I believe, and well, to me personally, is more of the economic opportunity cost for not implementing some of these steps. We're going through budget discussions. Today in council, we heard from the neighborhood council what they saw and issues of collection, et cetera. Do you see us entering or in some way adding this level of understanding in the economic consequence of not implementing? Because you mentioned political will.
Yeah.
That is one very influential factor. But the economic viability and opportunity cost for not doing this has a very real dollar figure to it.
It does.
And is that going to be in any way presented to us as you go through this?
We're not doing that kind of economic impact analysis. During our stakeholder meetings, there were lots of examples given anecdotally about it was too hard to get this project in the city of LA, and there was a concern about traffic. So guess what? We went across the city line, we went to the neighboring city, and we built it there. They get the tax dollars, and LA City still gets the traffic.
But perhaps we could have microcosms, vignettes,
Yeah, I think
scenarios.
I think one way we might be able to get at it is to look at some of the projects, and as they're expedited, that would bring the tax revenue in sooner to the city as maybe a possibility. Let me explore that some with the various participants and see what we might be able to do.
I just think the dollar figure will catch more attention
I believe you are correct.
in our colleagues as we go through
Yeah.
this process. But I appreciate that very much. Any questions from my colleagues for our presenter? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that. So we will note and file in as much as information is submitted for informational purposes, and I thank you for that hard work. Next item, Roberto?
Yes, council members. Item 2 is a motion, Wesson Koretz. It's instructing the planning department and the city attorney to prepare recommendations to allow nonprofits to obtain by right permits for farmers markets in the R zone.
Have the planning staff here for a brief report on item 2. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I think this is just a referral to staff. We've already begun some of our initial research on this topic.
Okay, so we'll just refer to staff. Thank you. That was a quick item. Appreciate that. Next item, Roberto.
The next item is the proposed community care facilities ordinance. Do you want to take that or jump into item 4?
Well, let's do item number 3. Let's just go
Okay.
down the road.
Okay.
Item 4, did you, the quick statement? Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
I want to keep you on hold here and suspense on item 3.
Yeah, okay. Item 4, council members, I'm Norman Cullen, representing Councilman Bill Rosendahl. This is a matter that is a Cultural Heritage Commission recommendation. We thank the Cultural Heritage Commission. They fashioned a solution to a contested matter. We're all here, we're all agreed, the applicants, the family, the Marquez family, and the owner of the property. The resolution is to convey a portion of the property, which has all been, it's in escrow. So what we would ask you to do, the commission identified the portion of the property that will be landmarked that's agreed, and that's their recommendation. We would ask you to support or approve their recommendation. And secondly, we would ask you, we need a little extra time for the escrow to close. this matter has to be acted on by council by April 13, we would ask that it would come with a recommendation to extend, as provided in LAAC Code 22.171.10, an additional 15 days for the council to act by April 28. And with that, I think all the parties here could concur that that's what everyone agrees.
Okay, so to be as clear as possible, are you asking us to continue this item?
No, I'm asking you to support the recommendation is of the commission, I don't know if that's in front of you, is to landmark the north portion of this parcel. We'd ask you to support that, approve it, and then also show good cause. I believe we've made a finding of cause to extend 15 days for the council action.
Madam Attorney, can you opine on this?
Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. So the first part of the item is if you concur with the staff recommendation and the findings, that you would recommend that this designation meets the requirement for a cultural monument under the administrative code provisions. And in addition to that, the parties are asking that this matter be continued. And so they're asking for a recommendation that before council takes its final action, that they extend the matter 15 days to allow the parties to work out some private matters between them that relate to the monument. They're not part of the findings themselves, but they're part of agreements between the private parties.
But the Cultural Heritage Commission did approve the expansion,
Yes,
and you're just fine-tuning what that means,
yes.
given the
No,
part...
we're not fine-tuning, we're accepting the recommendation,
Accepting it.
supporting the recommendation, ask you to approve the recommendation of the Cultural Heritage Commission, and rather than continue the matter, just send it to council with the understanding that we're going to ask council to please extend the time for final council action, rather than it's now would be required by April 13, that it could be, the action could be taken by April 28.
Okay. Okay, I have no problems with that. I think we can go along with it as long as the city attorney is fine with the procedure
Yes.
and it follows the guidelines. Any comments or questions? I would recommend yes. And a second? Okay,
Thank you very much.
move in that direction. Thank you very much. Okay, so then we go back to item number 3. And we did close public comment. And colleagues, my oversight, and I apologize, but item number 2, we did have a speaker card on that one. If we can go back to that one, that's okay. Just apologize, but we did have Jim McQuestion on item number 2, and I didn't see your card. You here, Jim? Mr. McQuestion? I apologize, colleagues, but I did want... He left? Okay. I'm going to suffer later. Okay. So let's go with item number 3. Roberto?
Councilman, this is the proposed community care facilities ordinance.
Okay, so we can have the staff come on. Well, we had a robust discussion, well, put it this way, a robust hearing, a lot of commentary, a lot of concern, and so we closed public comment last week. And so, in addressing the city attorney who was working and city planning staff on this report, based on last week's extensively public comment held in this committee, the concerns raised and based on your legal concerns, how do you see us addressing the items? And there were several items raised by Councilman Krikorian as far as these issues, but I'd like to open it up in a very general way and get the opportunity to respond to us in addressing some of these concerns. And then we'll take it from there. I'm sure my colleagues have other questions.
Tom Rothman, the Planning Department. After last week's hearing, you left us with several questions to research. I know that one of the biggest concerns was that if this ordinance was was adopted as proposed, would this limit housing for the disabled? Our position is that this would increase housing for the disabled. We are going to be allowing by right large community care facilities in our single-family zones as long as certain development standards are met regarding neighborhood issues such as density and parking and disruption. Right now, they are not allowed. There's no mention of them in the zoning code, so this is now permitting large community care facilities, the licensed ones, in our single-family zones by right. And that was the big question, and I think Amy has some answers for some other items, but if you have any questions about the disabled, follow up on that.
Can you answer as many questions as you can, given what was addressed on that day?
Okay. You want to take this one?
Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers. I want to start with a question I believe Council members Huizar and Krikorian both asked last time, and that was whether there was a conflict between the proposed ordinance and the state mental health codes. And first of all, we don't think there's a conflict at all. We recognize that the city and any municipality in California is preempted from regulating state licensed facilities for 6 and under. Those are considered residential uses, and in many times the state codes actually say that the uses are to be treated just like families. So we have no intention of conflicting with those. We are absolutely preempted, and state licensed facilities 6 and under will go in every zone. In contrast, boarding houses and unlicensed group homes are not state licensed and wouldn't be considered as such, and then therefore may be regulated the way the city decides. And in this instance, we're just maintaining our ordinances and saying that boarding houses are allowed in R3 and up zones. Councilman Krikorian also had a question about student housing needs and whether they could be met by exempting them from the definition of boarding house. And we don't need to go that far. There are 2 ways that these needs can be met. First of all, students may live together as a family in any zone in the city under this proposed ordinance. They just need to live together as under one lease and in accordance with the definition of single housekeeping unit. Students may also live in boarding houses in any zone except R1 and R2. So R3, R4, any of the commercial zones, the students can, we don't believe that this is going to hinder the needs for student housing. And I do want to emphasize that this ordinance should apply to everyone across the board. We should not be treating any group of residents in our city differently. The definition of boarding house has to apply equally to everyone. And that's part of the reason we decided to focus on simply clarifying the definition of boarding house. We already have the tools. We just need to tighten them up a little bit. And I think we can preserve the housing rights and the housing needs for the people in the city by approaching the ordinance this way. There's also a question as to whether there was a federal requirement that each person needs to have his or her own lease in order to take part in a particular program. And I have been given information. There was a reference to one of the HUD programs that the City of Los Angeles administers. Under that program, there are income eligibility requirements for families of different sizes. And here's where the one lease requirement rumor may have gotten started, but that's not actually what's happening. What happens is if there's a program client on a lease with a non-program roommate, the federal government will take into account the non-program roommate's income for purposes of determining eligibility. So it's a different, it's been mischaracterized. Just not at all a requirement that there only be one lease. There were also questions about the grandfathering issue, and we heard that from a lot of public comment as well. People were concerned that some of the uses that won't be allowed under the proposed ordinance will somehow have some vested rights. And this is not true. Boarding houses are a commercial use. They're not allowed in R1 and most R2 zones in the city. And consequently, if they're not operating legally now, they won't have any vested rights to operate as non-conforming uses in the future after this, if this proposed ordinance is enacted. So that should not be any concern at all. That's just not on the table.
Okay, so to emphasize what it does do, or doesn't do, the proposed ordinance does not change the city's zoning practices for facilities with 6 or fewer residents. Instead, the ordinance codifies that they are permitted in any zone where single-family uses are allowed per state law. Is that accurate?
I just want to clarify, Deputy City Attorney Amy Brothers, I just want to make sure that we are very specific. 6 and under applies to state licensed facilities, and those are allowed in any zone in the city. That is state law. We're required to adhere to that. Unlicensed facilities, boarding houses, that sort of thing, the number really doesn't matter. Boarding houses, as we've proposed, but even currently, are commercial uses, and as proposed, depend on how many leases will be, under which the residents will be living. So there's no cap on the number of folks who can live in a boarding house. It's not, 6 and under is really not applicable to that.
And part of the clarification is the ordinance does present definitions as it pertains to a whole range of uses, so that when the applicant and the inspector are responding to an issue or a case, that the clarity is there and we eliminate the ambiguity.
That's right. We have we've proposed at least 3 definitions straight from the state code. Those are state licensed facilities. Those are not included as boarding houses. For 6 and unders, as I've said, we're preempted, and as we've heard from Alan and Tom, on 7 and overs, we're proposing that they become seen as a public benefit and regulated again. And so absolutely, we've got the definitions for building and safety, and I think we anticipate having a worksheet, an enforcement worksheet in the future if this ordinance passes.
The overall benefit here is going to be that with these definitions, we'll have a stronger sense of accountability on how parcels are being used in specific zones that are now, and that we'll be in a place where folks who are in need of a certain care could have a reassurance that accountability is there, because they have to perform based on the criteria that's established by those particular facilities. So you don't have the kind of issues we have now where property owners are accumulating lots to build facilities that don't fit physically, and secondarily, there's no accountability as to how they behave and the impact they're having on the neighbors. So these are the benefits we see. So I'm saying this because what I heard in the public hearings that we were going to take away the opportunity to address certain illnesses, certain treatments that people need, and in fact, we're not doing that. What we're doing is we're trying to establish environments and parameters that allow them to exist with the understanding that there's accountability in how they behave and how they impact neighbors and how we take control of a greater quality of life for our residents. Would that be accurate?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, what we're doing with treating state licensed facilities 7 and over as public benefits, we are absolutely expanding opportunities for the disabled to live in any zone in the city, and that does not exist now. So actually, the proposed ordinance will further their opportunities to live anywhere in the city.
But it gives the city the ability to hold entities accountable for their behavior, because we have definitions now that fall under state rules and regulations that before we could not point to because it did not exist.
Yes.
So I just want to be emphatic about that, because what I heard is that we were being callous or we're not understanding, we're not treating, it's not in my backyard syndrome, and we're really trying to hold folks accountable.
That's right.
Thank you. Colleagues, anybody, any other questions or? Okay. All right. Are we sure? Last call.
Actually, one of the things that I think I raised last time was the correctional institution component of it, but I know my staff has been working on that and will continue to work on it. We can work on it before council. I don't need to belabor that here. I think we're making really good progress with this, and it continues to be a work in progress, so we'll continue to work on it before council. I don't need to belabor it here, but I do just want to highlight that issue because it's of special importance to me, and we'll come back before council with something further on that.
Okay. And just to, in closing, I just wanted to re-emphasize, or ask the question actually, does the RSO apply to this? Resident single occupancy?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
The
question?
RSO, residential single occupancy uses. I'm sorry, rent stabilization. Rent stabilization.
Amy Brothers, for the record. The RSO doesn't apply to single-family dwellings, but it does apply to boarding house units.
I just wanted that for the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Seeing no other comments or questions,
There are speakers on this item.
we close public comment. And I did mention them. So we could move forward the proposed ordinance and staff report to the city council as amended with added recommendations. And I didn't hear any added recommendations, except for the ones you recommend. Not yet. And further request planning to work with the housing department before this item in council on, to address any of their concerns as far as the housing department goes. And so that being the case, we can move this forward to council.
Councilman, are you going to request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance as well?
Yes. Thank you for that. Alan?
I don't know if staff will mention it, but we did want to offer an oral amendment to our recommendation to not include the exemption for the 6-foot floor specifically in the ordinance because state law already covers that, and that will make sure that we're not including a partial list in the ordinance. This was something that was pointed out in the letter from the Disability Rights Commission. There's no harm in doing that. The exemption will still apply. We only did that initially because we wanted to codify it and to communicate. By taking it out, we still retain that exemption. But it would make it a much cleaner, simpler ordinance, so we take out that 6 and under specifically within the city's ordinance.
Okay. And as amended, we can move this forward. All right. See, I think we've covered all our bases here. Okay, thank you very much. And again, for the public that came here on this discussion, we had public hearing. Last week we closed it, that's why we didn't open up this time. So that being said, that covers 3, 4. Roberto, anything else we should cover?
Public comment, Council.
Okay. Anybody here for public comment? Did you fill out a card? If not, come on up and fill one out for public comment. It's okay. Go ahead and make your statement, and you can fill out the card afterwards. Give us your name and address.
My name is Tom Sinzi. I live at 1853 Whitley Avenue in Hollywood. And my concern is that I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, if I understand this ordinance correctly, it will become illegal to have more than 7 roommates in a large house in Los Angeles.
Well, Madam Attorney, can we have public comment on an item on today's agenda?
Public comment is for items that are not on the agenda but are within the jurisdiction of this body, so this comment really goes to this last item.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm trying to follow the rules of the city.
Okay.
And because it's on the agenda today, we can really engage this discussion. Anybody else on items not on this agenda?
Yeah, it's not on the agenda at all. My name is Paul Dumont. I live at 6644 Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood, California. I would suggest that the Planning and Land Use Management Committee direct the Department of City Planning to draft an ordinance defining sober living homes. That's not on the agenda. Boarding houses are on the agenda. Sober living homes should be allowed by right in single-family neighborhoods where they function best and help people. They're not on the agenda. Sober living homes are not boarding houses. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. And those who did speak, can you fill out a speaker card, please? Thank you very much. Have a great day.